Well, I guess it's part 4 now about this machine. I mean, I guess the last part was only like half a part, so I guess this is like the 3rd true part about this machine. For those who haven't seen the other parts about this machine, a little bit of backstory for you. This is my AT&T Globalyst 630. It's a socket 5 machine from around 1995, maybe late 1994. And it's one of the last computers that ever sold with the AT&T brand name on it. There may have been like one other model after this, but there's not a ton of information about these computers online. It has a 100 megahertz Pentium, 16 megabytes of RAM, a S3 Trio 64 video card built in, a Sound Blaster 16, and at least when I got it, a 4 gigabyte IDE hard drive, which is definitely not the original hard drive, but it's just what the machine came with. And this machine was originally used at a movie theater for a sort of POS kind of server application thing. Basically, I think it would sync multiple point of sale terminals all to this computer to kind of synchronize them. That way, stuff is all synced together across, multiple stations or whatever. And in part 1 and 2, we basically got everything cleaned up, ready to go. It was pretty much good, except in part 2, I discovered that this computer has one of the worst IDE controllers ever made built into the motherboard, and that is the CMD 640. Without getting into too much detail, it has severe data corruption issues, and there's some workarounds. There's some different drivers and like tweaks I think you can do to kind of mitigate the issues. And supposedly the issues aren't as bad in DOS, but still, it's a complete mess. The fixes are really just putting a band-aid on it. And I still don't know if I would trust it even with that. So I definitely wanted to look for some other solution to getting a hard drive on here. Now, the motherboard actually probably has a second IDE controller on it. On the motherboard, the CMD controller's IDE connector is labeled PCI. The secondary one is labeled ISA, which, at least from the brief looking into I've done about the CMD controller, everything says it's a PCI controller. So I think the ISA IDE channel is probably just built into the VLSI chipset that this motherboard uses. And while I could hook something up to that, in fact, the CD drive is already hooked up to that, that would kind of create issues. I would have to basically mount a hard drive right here, run them in master and slave together, and performance probably wouldn't be that stellar. And of course, it can be maybe a little limiting, a little restricting. I could have did that, but I didn't really want to. And ultimately, in the end, I chose to upgrade the IDE controller to this. This is a Promise Ultra 33 ATA controller, and it can do, Ultra 33, and this should just overall be, faster than the CMD chip by a lot, in theory. And, of course, it should be perfectly fine. Except it wasn't. I don't know if this particular card is defective, or if it just has some sort of weird incompatibility, like conflict with this. I tried a bunch of different settings and whatnot, and just this card being in the system just screws everything up. Reading and writing data was just kind of unreliable. For whatever reason, I just could not install Quake off my CD for whatever reason. And it was also causing weird, graphical corruption on, certain 2D elements. It's really weird. Don't know why this particular card was just having so many issues, but yeah, there was no way I could use this thing. So that kind of really left me only with one other option if I wanted to, go with something other than the secondary IDE channel. And pretty much the only option beyond, this is going with a SCSI card. Now, I've never actually messed around with SCSI before. I own a single SCSI hard drive. It's a 1 gigabyte DEC hard drive, and apparently it came out of a Windows NT server. I didn't know that until I started messing around with, this in SCSI. But yeah, that's neat. I couldn't find any super interesting software or anything on it, but yeah, it had NT4 server and MS-DOS on it, so that was neat. But yeah, other than the drive situation and me only having the one drive, and I don't know if I'd really want to use that hard drive in this machine, I basically already had everything. I have a couple SCSI controllers to choose from, so really all I needed was a reliable drive that I could, trust and, count on. And thankfully, mostly due to the retro Mac community, since Macs were very prominently using SCSI back in the day, where it didn't ever really catch on with PCs unless it was, a high performance kind of workstation or server. But thanks to their efforts, there are several different SCSI emulators that you can get now, and that it'll just work on most, if not all, SCSI devices. Originally, your only options really were like the SCSI to SD, but nowadays there's things like the Zulu SCSI. I think there's also the raw SCSI, but I think that's more for external stuff. But the one I've chosen to go with, because it's the cheapest, and that's mainly what I care about. It's cheap, and it works, it does everything that I want it to, and that's the BlueSCSI. So yeah, this is the BlueSCSI. I already have it mounted in the hard drive caddy, which thankfully the one I bought was provided with a 3D printed bracket, and hard drive caddy is so easy to remove on this computer. I love it. And yes, I still have the original hard drive in here because, well, I don't really have a use to, take it out for. But yeah, this is the internal 50-pin version of the BlueSCSI. I think there's also a laptop version, and there's also an external DB25 version. But basically what this is it's a Raspberry Pi Pico-based solution. And basically you have a image, or actually you can have multiple different hard drive images. And I think even on the Mac, this actually supports CD images as well. Don't know if you can really do that on PC. I haven't totally looked into it yet, but yeah, you can have multiple hard drive images on here if you wanted to. And basically it just shows up as a SCSI device to your SCSI controller, and away you go. Now you can actually buy these as either a kit or fully assembled. I opted for the kit version because I think it was about $10 cheaper, and really you don't actually have to solder that much. Everything is soldered to the board except the 50-pin SCSI connector, the power connector, these few jumpers, and the Pico itself. Everything else, all the surface mount stuff, is already pre-soldered for you, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And yeah, this thing was actually quite easy to solder together. I'm not a soldering expert by any means. I'm still quite a novice at it, but it went pretty smoothly for me. I didn't really run into any big issues. The Pico can be a little tricky to solder together, but as long as you make sure the holes are lined up by using some of the jumpers before you solder them in, just make sure it's all lined up, and just use a lot of solder to really get all the way down the edge of the Pico and get under it to the pad underneath, and make sure you do that with all of them. And yeah, it works. I have to say, I think I did a pretty decent job. It actually worked the first time, which I wasn't expecting. Usually with these kind of kits, you usually have to come back and fix something, but it actually worked fine the first time. So yeah, the BlueSCSI is really nice and convenient. You can buy them for like under 40 bucks, again, if you get the kit version. So it's fairly affordable. And the nice thing is that most of the time, you don't even need the power connector. It can usually get enough power just directly over the SCSI bus. So that's very convenient. Now, originally I was using a 4 gigabyte SD card. In fact, I think it was one out of like my old 3DS XL or something like that. But I was having some really bad performance issues with it. Now, it's supposed to, in the log file, tell you if your card's not fast enough. It did not for me, but I was getting some pretty disappointing performance with it. It was kind of like hanging up, you know, when it was like trying to read stuff sometimes, and it just wasn't very fast. So I switched over to just a newer Samsung SD card that can read and write a lot faster, and that really solved the issue. So if you get one of these and you're kind of disappointed by the performance, make sure you get a decent SD card to use with it. So I have an 8GB image on here. Went with 8GB because I'm using DOS 622. FAT16, you're limited to 2GB partitions, and you can only do 4 of them, so that's what I've done. And while it's a little annoying that the SD card is pointed down at the bottom, I can't really, you know, get to it in there. The caddy is so easy to remove that it doesn't even matter. I can just pop the caddy out if I need to ever pull the SD card out. I was kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to transfer files to the SD card because all the utilities for this are really meant for the Mac, and there's not really Windows utilities that are made specifically for this to be able to transfer data between, you know, the image and your main modern computer. But you can actually just mount the image using WinImage, which yes, WinImage still exists. I didn't know that. I thought that was a relic of the 90s, but nope, WinImage is still around, still kicking, I guess. And yeah, I actually used it with Wine on my Linux system. It was able to read and write to the image just fine. So yeah, if you're a Windows or a Linux user and you're using it with, you know, an old PC and not a Mac, that's how you can transfer data. Just use WinImage. And this is the SCSI card I've opted for. I had 2 options. They're both by Adaptec, as most SCSI cards are. And that cable is kind of stuck in there. I don't want to risk ripping the cable apart because I only have 2 of these SCSI cables, and I'd like to not ruin one of them, so we're just going to leave it on. Yeah, this is an AHA 2940. Gonna be honest, I don't really know if that's a great controller, if it's kind of a mediocre controller. I don't know. I don't know what versions of SCSI this really supports. I don't know a lot about SCSI. All I know is the thing plugs in with, it's got the bigger cable. There's IDs or something you gotta set, and that's all I worry about. But yeah, unlike that Promise controller, this doesn't cause any issues. And then I can just kind of lay this cable flat here, and the case will close fine over this without issue. And yeah, there we go. And let's boot this thing up to see it in action. Yep, and there we go. The BlueSCSI is detected right there, and the SCSI BIOS installed itself. And I do have the ASPI driver installed because I was getting some weird issues with some stuff not working right, mainly Quake, because Quake is always finicky when it doesn't have the stuff that all the drivers and stuff loaded. At least in my experience. Like, I've had Quake not work because my network packet driver was not installed. Not kidding, that's happened before. But yeah, there we go. And because it's an 8GB image that we have, I have 4, 2GB partitions, and I basically just copied everything over from my K6 DOS/Windows 95 machine. Running DOS 622, and you don't have to do anything special in the setup of MS-DOS to install it on a SCSI device. It'll just detect it. But if we go into DOS Bench here, we can look at the disk performance. Go here to SpeedSys. It has a nice built-in hard drive benchmark, and does benchmark other stuff like the CPU and whatnot. Now, it would take a while to do the full hard drive tests and everything, but if we just take a look at some of the stuff here, we can see the access time is great. I don't know if you can actually see that. It's a kind of a not very high contrast color for the camera to read. But yeah, that's 1.81 milliseconds. That is significantly faster than any mechanical SCSI hard drive. And we can see the buffered read speed is about 7.3 megabytes a second. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't really know what the linear verified speed is, but I know what read speed is. So 7.3 is not as high as I thought it would be. The BlueSCSI is supposed to go up to around 10 megabytes a second. It's not really that big of an issue. It performs fast enough for anything I'd want to do on DOS. It's just, I did kind of think it would be a little faster than that. According to the program, at least, faster than like this 37 gigabyte Maxtor drive, this 13.99 gigabyte, I think that's a Quantum Bigfoot. I think that's what that's supposed to mean. Faster than an IBM like DeskStar or something. So yeah, it's faster. I imagine a lot of it is being bolstered by that just so much better access speed. That's just the power of any solid-state storage media. But I can show you that the video is no longer being corrupted. Originally, I was having issues in games like Epic Pinball and whatnot. I know it's running the benchmark and whatnot, but the menu was actually completely corrupted and everything. It was like shifted around and like lines weren't lined up correctly. It was all sorts of weird and messed up, but now it's working fine. It's working as it should. No weird conflicts or anything. Haven't had any issues with writing or reading data. It's been working fantastic. So it's nearly perfect, except that I've discovered an issue, and it's actually with the Sound Blaster. Now, maybe I have something configured wrong. I don't know. You can look here at my config sys, and although there's nothing in the config sys about the Sound Blaster, if you look at my autoexec.bat, you can see my settings here. I have tried changing some of these, like the interrupt, DMA, and whatnot, but let me actually show you what the problem is. So if you don't know, a Sound Blaster is kind of two halves. It's not the best way to put it, but basically there's the sort of ad-lib compatible side that has like the OPL synthesis and whatnot, and then there's the actual like Sound Blaster side, and the Sound Blaster side basically plays like digital samples and whatnot, like digital speech, sound effects, module files, you know, stuff like that. You know, sound and Windows is all played through the Sound Blaster portion, but you get all that lovely OPL goodness through the kind of more ad-lib side. Again, it's not the best way to put it, but for those who know how it works, you know what I'm talking about. Now, there's a problem, and it'll probably stand out to you. You'll probably notice it pretty quickly, because everyone knows what E1M1 sounds like. Well, that's annoying, because now it's working fine. Thankfully, I recorded footage of what it was doing before. Yeah, there's clearly something not right with the way it's handling OPL sound. Don't know why it's fine now, but yeah, it was doing it in Doom, Doom 2, Duke Nukem, basically anything with OPL sound. However, one thing that I know for sure is definitely still going to mess up is Ad-lib Tracker. I think it'll be very obvious very quickly that it's not working correctly. It's not like it was just that one or something. It's very clearly all of them are not working right. And the problem is, yeah, it gets a hanging note. And even if you Control-Alt-Delete, it doesn't get rid of it. So that's annoying. Actually, really ear-grating. Turn that off. So yeah, there's something not right with the sound. It's weird, the Sound Blaster portion works perfectly fine, but I've tried changing like the IRQ, the DMA. It hasn't really changed anything. And I actually might be able to get it to act up again in a game here, because I think the game audio messing up tends to be, it only happens on like a fresh boot, like no other programs have been opened before it, but that's just how it is for some reason. We'll see. Well, at least I got the evidence from earlier. But yeah, something's up with the sound. I don't really know what it is. I especially don't know what it is now that the sound is now working okay in the games. AdLib Tracker is still screwed up, and maybe I'll recopy AdLib Tracker on here, just maybe some of the files or something got corrupted. Maybe, but I think there's still something wrong with like either the configuration or the sound card itself. I don't think the sound card is necessarily bad. I still think this is like some sort of configuration problem, maybe. I've tried switching the ISA slots that the sound card's in, didn't change anything. I've tried the different settings. It didn't seem to do anything different really, so I don't really know. So I may end up just trying a different sound card in here, maybe an ESS card at some point, just to see if that changes anything. All right, so I actually already swapped the sound card. I planned on doing it later, but I got bored and I figured I might as well do it now. Yeah, so this is just an audio drive, 1868. It's actually really stripped down. It literally only has the sound chip and a wavetable header. Like, that's it. No CD-ROM interface or anything like that. But as we can see, ah, dang it. Yeah, that's a lot better sounding. Yeah, so I don't know what's wrong with this thing. Yeah, it's weird that the OPL is the only issue, because there's the chip. So yeah, I don't know what the issue is. It's got a real OPL chip right there, so who knows, but the ESS works fine now, so I don't really care. But yeah, other than the sound stuff, everything else seems to mostly be working fine. SimCity 2000, I actually had to go with the floppy disk version and not the CD-ROM special edition that I have. For whatever reason, it would get hung up after playing the FMVs, and I could never get it to go any further, so I don't know what's up with that, but it works fine with the floppy version, so who knows. I figured we'd go over some benchmarks of the system real quick, since I wanted to do that, I think, back in episode 2, but the video was just too long, and I was, again, running into those issues. So overall, the system performs basically how you would expect it to. The performance is pretty much in line with what I'd expect from a 100 MHz Pentium system. 3D Bench got 82.7, Chris's 3D Bench got 70.2 FPS, and 3D Bench at 640 by 480 got 20 FPS. Doom with Max Details got 48.2 FPS, Quake at 320 by 200, 25.1 FPS, and Quake at 640 by 480, 8.1 FPS. That's basically exactly how I'd expect it to perform, which is good. That means there's not really any weird performance issues going on. Doesn't perform amazingly, stunningly well, but I wouldn't have expected it to. So yeah, it's actually a pretty decent DOS machine now. It can play basically every game you could want. Even the later stuff like Quake, 25 FPS in Quake. I mean, that doesn't sound good by modern standards, but you consider at the time, 25 was way better than what most people were getting, especially if you had like a 486, like you weren't getting anywhere close to this. So yeah, games really aren't an issue for this system, which is so relieving after all the effort I've put into making this thing work correctly. But yeah, I'm just glad that everything works now. We saw that the performance was good in those benchmarks, and I'm just really happy that everything's working except the sound. But that's not the end of the world. The machine is in a usable, functional state, and that's all I've wanted. I've wanted this for months. We finally got it, and I'm happy. So what I've learned is that SCSI is not as hard or scary as it might initially seem. It can be kind of intimidating, but yeah, it's not that hard to get set up, especially on a later system like this. BlueSCSI good. I can recommend it. All the documentation is mostly written for Mac, which is a little annoying, but you can probably figure it out for a DOS or Windows system. It all works good. This is not going to be the end for the Globalyst on the channel. You'll definitely see it for at least one more video that I want to do. I'm not going to say what yet, but I think it'll be pretty interesting. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's it for the system for now. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh yeah, the BlueSCSI kit came with a little sticker, so I figured, maybe like right there. And maybe I think that'll look pretty good. It's on the side, so it doesn't really stand out that much, Keeps the original look of the machine, I think, pretty well. Here we go. That looks nice.